All right, so let's start with our flashcards on our unit on civil liberties. So we're going to do this rapid fire. It's not the only things you need to know for the unit, and there's quite a bit in this unit. So just a quick overview of each of the flashcards. Let's get started. The first one, the Bill of Rights. What's in it? Okay, why was it added? I mean, we know this. This is review. Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. It establishes liberties that people in the United States have, and it limits, at least it was designed originally, to limit the federal government, to limit the power of the federal government. The anti-federalists during the ratification debate were very concerned that the Constitution created a federal government that was too powerful, and so these Bill of Rights were part of a compromise to get the Constitution ratified. The idea was, let's ratify the Constitution. We'll add amendments to it. We'll make sure that there are restrictions on what the government can do, and that'll limit the power of the government and make those anti-federalists feel a little more comfortable about things. The second flashcard about civil liberties versus civil rights. So this is just kind of a technical way of making sure we understand what it is we're talking about. Although those terms are sometimes used interchangeably and not necessarily incorrectly. I mean, it's okay to talk about rights and liberties. In some ways, they kind of mean very similar things. But for the purposes of our course, civil liberties is really about individuals and the government and the relationship between them. What can the government do to limit individual liberties that people have? So an individual's right to practice their religion, or the limits on the government's ability to impose searches, or what legal due process rights do people have. So that's really what civil liberties are. When you're talking about civil rights, which is going to be our next unit, you're really talking about how the government treats different groups differently, and are they treating groups equally under the law? We're really referring a lot to the 14th Amendment, which comes later on. The 14th Amendment says that no state will take away equal protection of the laws. And all of a sudden, there's all sorts of questions about whether the Constitution can be interpreted in a way to make sure that groups of people are not treated differently. And that's a really important development in the U.S. Constitution, because it wasn't in there before the 14th Amendment. So the civil rights is all about different groups, African-American groups, women, Hispanics, indigenous people, LGBTQ, anyone who has been perhaps treated differently under the law. And the question is, have they been discriminated against by government, and what constitutional protections do they have to seek redress for that? So we'll explore that more in our next unit. Now, of course, flashcard 3, this is, again, a broad concept that we've explored in the past, and that the courts define what the Constitution means. They have the power of judicial review, okay? So their job is to interpret the Constitution. And so the understanding of the Bill of Rights and what it means over time, that clearly evolves. And we've seen, as we've studied this unit, there are many different cases that have come up and continue to come up about what does the First Amendment mean, in what does the Second Amendment mean in the context of modern era and different modern weapons that exist. What does the Fourth Amendment mean in the era of cell phones and digital privacy? So the understanding of the Bill of Rights constantly evolving through judicial review and court interpretation, and of course that depends on judicial philosophy. So the first three flashcards are kind of big overview flashcards. Now we dive into different constitutional amendments. We spend a lot of time in this unit on the First Amendment. So there's different provisions of the First Amendment, and when it comes to religion, there's actually two separate clauses. We call the Establishment Clause, where it says the government will not establish a religion, or Congress will not establish religion. That's about what the government is doing. Is the government promoting a religion? Is the government pushing some sort of religious test or religious requirement on people? Or are they, in a unconstitutional way in getting entangled in religion? So if the government is going too far in promoting religious beliefs, that's an Establishment Clause question. So the one key required case we have for this is Engel versus Vitale. This was about school prayer. Okay, the basic facts is in New York in the 1960s, they had a voluntary school prayer at the beginning of each day. And the question was, for the constitutional clause, was the Establishment Clause being violated? Was New York violating the Establishment Clause? Remember, the First Amendment has been incorporated. It's applied to the states. We'll talk about that in a later flashcard. And the outcome is yes. The precedent is that the government can't establish or promote prayer in schools. That goes against the First Amendment restrictions on government action as it relates to establishment of religion. So this is a really important case. It's a required case for this unit and for the AP course in general. And just be mindful that it's not just the freedom of religion clause. It's not just the First Amendment. It's a very specific provision of the First Amendment that is at issue here, which is the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Now, when we talk about religion, we also talk about the Free Exercise Clause. And so the government won't establish a religion, nor will Congress prevent your own free exercise, the individual's right to exercise their own faith. And so that's really what the Free Exercise Clause is. That's about the individual doing the action and whether the government can limit their action. Now, of course, we know that in all of these cases throughout this entire unit, the question is, where do you draw a line? Because the government can restrict and prevent certain things from happening. You can't do whatever you want and just say it's my religion if it's harming other people or if it's endangering society. So that's really what the Constitution, the courts are trying to kind of figure out over the course of U.S. history is, where do we draw that line? And the required case for the Free Exercise Clause is Wisconsin versus Yoder. This is a case from 1972, and it's about a group of Amish parents who didn't want to send their children to school in Wisconsin, to public school. They wanted to pull them out after the 8th grade, and in Wisconsin they were required to go until they were age 16. And they said the public schooling in high school went against the religious beliefs of their faith. And this was challenged by Wisconsin and the Supreme Court. Okay, first of all, those are the basic facts. The constitutional clause here is not just the First Amendment, it's the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. And because this is about the state of Wisconsin infringing upon the rights of people, in this case, a group of Amish people, from practicing their own religious beliefs. And the outcome here, the decision was that the state of Wisconsin went too far. They violated the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. They went too far and infringed upon the rights of these Amish groups. So, the First Amendment does very much protect. It protects against government involvement in religion, and it protects individuals' rights to practice their own religion. We explored both of those cases in class. They're required cases for the AP exam as well. Moving forward with the First Amendment, let's talk about speech and expression. So Flashcard 8 talks about the idea of symbolic speech. And, the question is, what is really speech when you think about it? Is it just words that people are speaking? And the Supreme Court says no. Okay, they say, expressing yourself in nonverbal ways, that's also speech. That's also protected under the Constitution. Now, the one case we have here is an interesting one because it relates to schools. This is Tinker versus Des Moines. This is a case where a few students decided they wanted to wear black armbands with a peace sign on them to protest the Vietnam War, and they were basically punished for doing this because the school had basically issued a policy, that kind of responded. They knew this protest was going to happen, and so they said, well, anybody who does this, it's going to be distracting, and we're not going to permit it, and if you do it, you're going to be punished or suspended. So this is also about the First Amendment. It's about the freedom of speech. The government won't abridge the freedom of speech clause of the First Amendment. And the precedent here is that, symbolic speech is protected under the Constitution. Okay, not just spoken speech, but symbolic speech. That's important. And that students have free speech rights in school. They may be more limited, but they do have speech and expression rights in school. So those are important precedents that are made in 1969. Now, we're going to continue to go through restrictions on the First Amendment and, the question about where do we draw the line when it comes to free speech and expression. But fundamentally, one of the things that you need to know is that there are permitted restrictions on the First Amendment. So Flashcard 10, it says time, place, and manner regulations. So basically, what this means is that the government can restrict speech, broadly speaking. They can restrict when, speech occurs, where it occurs, and the way in which it occurs, as long as they're not basically going against and completely removing someone's ability to express or speak, as long as they still have the opportunity to do that, and as long as the government is doing it for some reason other than just to restrict the speech. if they're putting restrictions on time, place, and manner, they should be doing it because they want to maintain public safety, because there are kind of spaces that they're designated for this. So if the government's not acting in a discriminatory manner, then they can regulate speech, and that's something that's kind of makes sense. But we continue to have challenges throughout U.S. history about what is appropriate restrictions on speech and what's not. So another restriction on speech, flashcard 11, obscenity. And no, you don't need to know the clear, three-part definition that was articulated in a case called Miller versus California. What you do need to know is that obscenity is basically, you can restrict, the government can restrict things that are obscene if the things that they're restricting, that they're judged by the contemporary community standards. They're saying we're going to judge it by the time and the place in which the speech is occurring. So we're not going to use the standards from 1790 about what's obscene. Okay, what's vile. We'll use modern day standards and the standards of the community. And they also say it has to be basically appealing to what they call the prurient interest. This has to be purely sexual interest that it's trying to appeal to, and it has to basically not be art. So they say, we're basically talking about pornographic material, and the government can restrict that. They can prevent that from being disseminated or expressed in public, because the government has an interest in regulating that and protecting the public at large from things that they might see as very objectionable. So obscenity, things that are obscene, those can be restricted. Flashcard 12, we talk about how things that cause a, quote, clear and present danger, those can also be restricted. Things that put an immediate danger to society. So Schenck versus United States, a required case for the AP exam and for our purposes as well. This is about anti-war protesters during World War I sending out leaflets advocating resistance to the draft, and they got convicted for violating the Espionage and Sedition Acts, for interfering with the government war effort. And you could argue whether or not the Supreme Court would rule the same way today in 2021 as of the moment I'm recording this, and they potentially would not. But the legal principle still stands, is what the court basically said was, if speech creates a clear and present danger to society, it can be restricted. And the equivalent that they used in the opinion is, they said this is the same as shouting fire in a crowded theater. It'll cause a stampede, it'll cause immediate harm, and it can endanger society. We can agree or not whether these two ideas are equivalent, shouting fire in a crowded theater and sending out leaflets that are not violent, or not advocating violence directly. But nonetheless, the clear and present danger test is still a legal concept that can be used. That sort of speech that causes an immediate danger can be limited. So that's important. Other things that can be limited: libel and slander. Libel is printed defamation, harming someone's reputation with falsehoods, and slander is spoken. So somebody could file a lawsuit against someone else for harming them in some way by spreading falsehoods or lies or defaming them. But it's important to know that if it's a public figure, that the question here is, if a newspaper prints something and it's about someone in public office or a celebrity, then it's a very high standard or threshold to prove that libel or slander is something that they could be found guilty of wrongdoing for. So basically, if it's a public figure, that you have to be found that you knew it was false and that you printed it or you said it with actual malice, trying to do harm. And so if that can be proven, then libel and slander is not protected, even for public figures. But it's a higher standard. If you're the president of the United States, the court has kind of said, look, it's kind of fair game. You're subject to public scrutiny a lot more. But if you're a regular citizen, not a public figure, you do have those much more protection. Continuing down the First Amendment, prior restraint, freedom of the press. The Supreme Court has argued that the government can't restrict freedom of the press prior to publication unless they have some overwhelming reason to do so. Prior restraint is the idea of the government preventing a publication from printing something. And that's something that the Supreme Court has said is, it's very questionable if the government ever tries to do this. And they basically said prior restraint's not something the government can do unless it's the most extreme circumstances. The required case study we have for flashcard number 15 is New York Times versus United States. This was about the Pentagon Papers. The New York Times got their hands on, somebody had leaked to them this series of government documents that made the government look bad, basically, as it related to the Vietnam War. So the government had ideas the Vietnam War was a bad idea right from the start. There were a lot of people in the government who were opposed to it, which maybe went against public pronouncements the government was making. So the Nixon administration, they tried to prevent the New York Times from printing it. They got a lower court to issue a restraining order. They said, stop, you can't print it. It's national security. And the Supreme Court heard this case, got challenged up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, this is not a national security issue. No one's being put in immediate danger. And they said prior restraint, the government can't exercise prior restraint whenever they want. The First Amendment applies. The freedom of the press applies. So there's a lot of First Amendment freedoms that we just went through in the first flashcards 1 through 15, as well as some general ideas. It's a good place to stop. We'll pick up with the other flashcards in the next video.